Good morning. This is Mike Casey with Home Inspection University. Today during this session we're going to be looking at some roofs. And right now we're at a house in the Midwest, and this home has a composition shingle roof. It's a typical 3-tab roof, about 20 years old or so. It looks to be original. It looks like it is pretty well installed, but we're going to go through and do an inspection from the ground on this one, which would be typical for this type of a roof. It's a steep slope. It's about a 6 to maybe 8 in 12 slope roof, so it's not really one that you want to be walking. Typically what I would do is inspect it from the ground, many times use binoculars, and then also I'd probably put up a ladder at the eaves so that I can look at the edge of the roof and other details. So this one we're going to go ahead and walk around. You can see maybe it's multiple gables. It's a pretty complicated roof. It's a large home, so it's a lot of roof surface to look at, and of course if it needs to be replaced, it's a lot of money to replace it. So let's go ahead and look at some of the details. So we're looking at the different planes of this roof. We're going to just start on one side and go ahead and walk around and check out this whole roof. You can see up here it's a single row offset on the 3-tab composition shingles. That's a pretty typical job. Typically the keyways, which are the pieces between, or the stices I've heard it called as well, but the keyways between the tabs, that's where you're going to get the most erosion because that's where the water runs. So looking at these, I can see a little bit of wear. It looks like the roof is probably, as I said, about 20 years old or so. We've also got some branches rubbing the roof, which should be trimmed back. Not good to have trees rubbing the roof, so I'll recommend they be cut back. It also looks like the gutters need to be cleaned. So we want to look at gutters and where they go, the condition of the gutters. Many times they're sagging or falling off the building. So we want to make sure that we're controlling the water that comes off the roof and get it away from the house. And you can see here we've got large gutters and then downspouts that come down, and we've got some little distribution plastic bottoms on them. I like to look at these at the bottom of the gutters and the leaders and see if there's a lot of granule buildup from the shingles. When the shingles start to wear, you'll get a lot of the ceramic granules from the shingle will come off, and they end up in the landscaping over here. Now this looks to be pretty clean. I don't see a bunch of the granules at the bottom, but we're still going to be looking at the roof and see what conditions we have, in particular at the flashings. So let's go ahead and move on around the corner. So we're over in another corner of the house, and you can see here we've got one projection from the house is connected to the front here, another gable, and we've got a woven valley. You can see kind of beyond the trees. It's hard to see it, I know. We've got more trees that need to be cut back. But if you look at where the valley ends, we can see a lot of debris in the gutter. There's also debris over here. So the gutters definitely need to be cleared out. The debris on the roof, that tends to slow down the roof water runoff, and that's not good for the roofing material. It gives the water more opportunity to go ahead and get in underneath the shingles. So this area here needs some attention, and we're going to go ahead and move around to the front. So while we're walking around the house and looking at the roof, we also want to be looking at the attic ventilation and paying attention to the trim and the fascia and what have you around the perimeter, looking for deteriorated wood. And I also want to be evaluating the attic ventilation while I'm looking. So on this home, if we look up here, we can see we've got soffit vents, and a lot of times they get painted over and they're not really functional. So I'll be looking at the soffits for ventilation, and this being somewhat of an older home, up here at the corner of the gable, you can see we have a gable vent. Now most likely when this roof gets replaced, the best action is going to be to install a ridge vent. But this home does not have it. As I said, it's about a 20-year-old or so roof, and we want to pay attention to attic ventilation. So we got gable vents, soffit vents, and we're going to be looking around the whole perimeter, making sure that that's continuous, that this isn't the only ventilation we have. So we're going to go ahead and move on over here. As we continue walking around and looking at this house and the roof, again, we're looking up at the soffit here. You can see that we do have the soffit openings. They're pretty much continuous all the way around the house. And there is another gable vent over here to the right, which you probably can't see in the shot. But we want to keep looking into making sure that we have ventilation, that there's no evidences of deterioration. So we're going to continue walking around the house and look at more of the roof. Now this roof has a number of architectural details that are at the bottom of the gables, and there's a lot of them on this house. And you can see how the hip shingle that's kind of bent over the top of the hip rafter there, where it's starting to deteriorate and crack on the top of the shingle. So that's pretty typical evidence of aging for a roof that's this age. 20 years old, I'm going to expect to see some deterioration and cracking like that. So it's just telling me that things are pretty consistent with what I'm told regarding the age of the roof, and most likely it's going to need to be replaced at some time in the near future. Probably the next 1 to 3 years would be not a bad idea. You want to always catch it before it starts to leak. So we'll continue around and look at some more. So here we can see a roof-to-wall condition, and we have a nice detail with the step flashing and the counter flashing. You can see that the metal is way high up on the masonry veneer. It's been adhered into a reglet, into the brick, or maybe it's just glued onto it. It's hard to tell from here, but it looks to be substantial. It doesn't look like it's pulling away in any of the areas, so it looks like a nice flashing job. When I get inside, of course, I'm going to be looking at all the ceilings and walls for any evidences of water intrusion. But just looking at this, it seems to be pretty typical. I don't really see anything to complain about on that. So the flashing looks to be in good shape. So we're continuing around this house and looking at this roof, and you can see we have a nice big plane of the roof here above the garage that we can look at. And this type of a roof, what I'm looking for is anything that looks to be out of place. These shingles should be pretty symmetrical. Everything should look pretty much routine and the same. And I'm looking for anything that just looks oddball, like a loose shingle, anything that's overexposed. I'm looking for damage, anything that's unusual like shingle buckling or what have you. So we just want to take a look at the whole plane of the roof. Does anything look weird? This one looks to be in pretty good shape. Don't see anything unusual, typical wear for something this old. So we'll continue on around and look at some more of this roof. So we're continuing around the house looking at the roof, and on this part of this roof we can see that we have a porch, and if you look at the valley, that's called a closed cut valley. A little bit different than the weaved valley we saw on the other side. And the shingles look to be in good shape. Don't see anything that's lifting or unusual. Up at the chimney, the flashing looks to be in good condition. I see maybe a little bit of a tab lift at the lower left corner of the chimney, but generally that's not a big deal. So we'll continue around, and just remember, we're going to look in the attic as well and see if there's any leakage there. There's a lot of other things we want to look at on the roof, or that are related to the roof, to see if there's any evidence of leakage. You want to make sure you check all the ceilings inside, and of course the attic as well. So let's go ahead and continue around and see what we got. So the areas to really pay attention to are any penetrations in the roof, like flue pipes, plumbing vent pipes, and roof-to-wall conditions or changes in plane of the roof. That's usually where it's kind of the sensitive area where you may get some water intrusion, because we have to have flashings and other details. So right here on this roof, we have a roof-to-wall condition, and you can see where it meets the edge of the house. We've got flashing and counter flashing. That looks to be in pretty good shape. But then we have a kind of a complicated corner right here with a lot of materials coming together, kind of up in this area here. So we're going to take a closer look at this. I've set up a ladder so I can get up and just view it and inspect it more closely and see if there's anything going on here. So we're going to go ahead and take a closer look at this. So we're going to go ahead and get up on a ladder and take a closer look at that rather complicated detail that I was just pointing out previously. So we're going to go ahead and take a look up here. Be careful on the ladder. Now here we've got this corner, lots going on here, and I see some staining on the wood here, and it looks like that wood is very soft. You can see where I'm pushing on it with my finger. It shouldn't move that much, so that tells me that we've got some water getting in. There's some deterioration going on. And the other thing to consider as well is we don't know what's going on behind this. So there could be some hidden damage inside here as well. If I'm able to push on this and it moves around like that, that means that we may have some more damage inside. So I'm going to take a look up top and see what's going on up there. But this is definitely going to be an area where I'm going to recommend it be checked by maybe a roofing contractor or a general contractor, and they may have to open it up and see what kind of damage is inside, and of course make the repair. So let's go ahead up and take a look closer on top. So here we're above that area we were just looking at, where we had some soft material in the soffit where it looked like water was getting in, and I see a couple of things here. We've got, looks like a flashing that's damaged or maybe was added later on. This piece of flashing is over top of the trim, so it's going to buck water and allow water in. We can see some damage to the wood here. It looks like some caulking where there's been an attempt at a repair. And here we have a torn shingle. And the flashing is actually damaged, like something, like almost like a mechanical damage. And I can see where it's split up in here. So very interesting what's going on here. I'm going to be recommending a roofer. And then over here, we can see where there's some flashing, there's wood close to the roof. And then I'm going to go ahead and check the shingles. I'm going to see they're a little bit brittle. I like to kind of feel the corner here. I can feel some brittleness. I can see some wear at the keyways. And then over here, I'm going to check this corner for the underlayment, and I can see a big hole right here where water can get in. The underlayment is short, the flashing is short, and we can see there's a hole, and this is right above that area where we had the moisture below. So this whole corner looks like it needs some work. Definitely we've got an issue with water getting in here. We've got a hole, and it's easy for water that's running off the siding here to get into this area here and get right into that hole. So definitely we've got some repairs that need to be done here. It looks like somebody's gotten after it a little bit, but definitely needs to be repaired better. And we can see the minerals on the shingles are deteriorated a bit, so might be time to think about replacement of the roof. Let's go look at some more. So we're continuing around this roof again, and we can see we've got a couple of gables up here, and we're looking at the surface. Once again, I'm looking for any shingles that look to be out of place, just anything that's not symmetrical. It should look pretty much all the same. I'm looking at the chimney. I don't see any loose flashings. Of course, we're going to look inside as well for any water staining. And then we've got this plane of roof over here closer to me. Looks to be in good shape. Don't see anything missing or loose or sliding off. So that looks to be in pretty good shape. You know, once again, the roof is a bit older, so we're going to comment on that in the report. But essentially, this is looking pretty good. Again, we want to look close at the details, the roof-to-wall conditions. That's where the problems are going to be, like we just showed you before. So we'll continue around. We got a little bit more here to look at, and we're going to move this way. See you there. So we're at the other side of the house now, continuing our inspection around. And here we can see it's a factory-built chimney chase. It's got some wood siding on it. It almost looks like it may have been added, but I'm not sure yet. I haven't been inside. If you look at the location of it, though, we're right in a valley. You can see that we've got a closed-cut valley up there, and the valley dives right into the back of the chimney. So, you know, not a perfect detail for sure, but sometimes it happens. You've got no choice where you're going to put the factory-built fireplace. So it's going to be critical that the back side of that chimney be properly flashed. There should be a saddle or something there to divert all that water. You got two planes of roof coming together, so there's going to be a heck of a lot of water running down that valley, and a way to divert the water from the back of the chimney to get it to the sides. So that's going to be a spot where I'm going to look real close in the attic and in the house for any evidence of leakage. Moving up the plane of roof, we can see we've got a gas vent. That's a B vent or double wall type galvanized steel pipe. And you'll notice at the top there's some rusting. Now that could be from products of combustion or condensing, and they'll just kind of drip down the outside of that pipe and cause that rusting. So I'm going to comment on the rust. I'll probably recommend that that pipe be replaced at some time in the near future. And then just beyond that gas vent, you can see that almost looks like a bell sticking out of the top of the roof. That looks to be an attic fan to me. So when I get up in the attic, I'll take a look at that. Many times they're not operational anymore. People turn them off because of the noise, or the thermostat goes bad. So we're going to just move over to this plane here, and we'll be pretty much done with this roof, and we'll move on to the next house. Okay, this is the final side of the roof, and we can see we've got a little bit of staining on the roof. That's pretty typical for this age of a roof. We've got a little closed cut valley over here beyond that tree. Once again, I don't see any shingles that are out of place. Everything looks to be symmetrical. I see a little bit of moss growing around the ridge cap here. So, again, it's a roof 20, 25 years old. My recommendation is going to be to get the repairs done where we've got that hole in the roof. So I'll recommend that a roofing contractor inspect the entire roof, because there could be other places where we're getting conditions that need to be repaired. We can't really tell here from the ground, but this roof is too steep for me to walk on safely. So I don't want to fall, so I'm not going to walk on the roof. And I've seen enough to recommend a roofing contractor come out. And really it might be a good choice to just go ahead and replace the roof at this time because it is original to the house. So it's, it's over 20 years old, and that's about the life expectancy of a typical 3-tab shingle roof. So we'll see you at the next house. We're going to go look at another one. Hi, I'm Mike Casey with Home Inspection University, and we're going to continue with our composition roofing inspection video. We already did one very steep roof. We're here at another home now, and this one has pretty much a medium slope roof. Looks like maybe a 5-12 slope. Now this roof is an architectural shingle, or what some people will call a laminated fiberglass shingle. It's a pretty simple roof to inspect. It looks like it's a single gable. We've got a projection over here for a porch, and then on the front there's another projection for a garage. So it should be a pretty simple inspection. We can see over here at the porch connection, that's a closed cut valley. So we'll be getting up on this roof over at another spot. You can see up near the ridge, we've got some ridge vents installed. There's also looks like there's an attic fan. That's that round dome-shaped piece. And then we'll show you, this house also has soffit vents, so we have low ventilation and high ventilation, which is the best way to do it because the warm air is going to come out through these upper ones. My guess on this roof is it's probably less than 10 years old. Looks to be, in good shape from the ground. But on these, I like to get up on them. I like to look behind the chimney and make sure that we've got a good saddle behind the chimney from the ground. The flashing looks to be in good condition, but it's hard to tell from here. The best way, of course, is to get up on the roof as long as it's safe. Now on this roof, it did rain this morning, so we're going to be careful. We're going to get up on this roof, take a look at as much we can, and we're going to show you what we find. So I'll see you up on the roof. As I was just saying, we have soffit vents at this house, so before we jump up on the roof, we'll look at these quick up here. And you can see at the soffit, we've got some vents, probably about every 8 to 10 feet or so. And they're louvered type vents. I don't see where they're painted over or they're restricted in any way. Now, of course, sometimes they're restricted in the attic by insulation if there aren't baffles installed. But so far from the outside, looks to be in good shape. So we're going to go ahead and go around to the other side where there's an easier access for the roof. And we're going to go ahead and get up. Oh, one more thing. While we're looking at the roof, we want to look at the gutters and see if there's any sag or detachment or anything that's unusual with those. We'll go over and look at the downspouts and make sure that the water is being directed away from the building. And you can see here the gutters look to be good. They're tight. I don't see any sagging or evidence of leakage or anything so far. So look to be in good shape here. So we're going to head over and hop up on the roof now. So on our way over to get up on this roof, we noticed that we've got this gutter downspout right here. And you can see where it comes down at the corner. And over here at the corner of the house, it looks like the water was probably ponding. We've got a fence and some concrete that kind of creates a captured area. So you can see here where there was an extension installed on the downspout right here. And now another extension brought to it to try to get the water out here further away from the building. I'd probably suggest some improvement with this, particularly if it's a basement building. You want to get that water as far away as possible. And also I can see over here that this downspout connection is leaking water, and we've got some water ponding right next to the house here. I just love doing inspections right after it rains. It really tells us a lot about what's going on. So this is great. We can see some moisture here and make a recommendation to get that water further away from the building. So now we're going to head up on the roof. So once again, before we get up on the roof, I found something else. I couldn't resist looking here. So we're still at this downspout we were just talking about, and I happened to notice as we were coming around the corner, if we take a look down here, we can see this downspout. It looks like it was extended, as I was saying before. However, I'm looking here and I see this little flower pot bottom, and I lift it up and we can see that there's a drain pipe here, which I believe was probably the original underground drain for this downspout. And this tells me that there's something wrong with it. It probably wasn't working, it was overflowing. This type of flexible drain pipe tends to clog. So my comment here was, it would be basically, it looks like it's not being utilized, probably because it's not working. So I'm going to recommend that they inquire with the homeowner as to what happened. Is this not working? Because certainly getting it piped away underground and far away from the home is the best thing to do. But it looks like it might not be working. So we don't know because it's underground. So we're going to recommend some further inquiry or maybe investigation by a landscaper. Now let's go up on the roof. So we're finally getting up on this roof, and what we're doing here is we're standing on a shed roof that's right next to the house, and we're going to look at one of the slope sides of this roof, and we can see that the shingles themselves look to be in pretty good shape. If you feel one of the tabs, we can see that it's still flexible, it's not brittle and just breaking off. And when we look down in the gutter, I don't see a whole lot of granule wash off from the roof. So like I said, I'd estimate this roof to be less than 10 years old. Looking over here, we can see one of the pipe flashings, and that's a neoprene flashing. They tend to deteriorate pretty quickly, so I like to look at those closely. I also tell my clients that they're going to require periodic maintenance. And then back here at the roof to wall condition, we can see that there's really no visible flashing there. I'm not sure how it was flashed originally. Typically what you'd want to see is a piece of metal coming out from underneath the vertical wall and over top of the shingle. And it looks to me like they just laid out the shingles right on top of it. And we can see right at the very top where it looks like someone took roofing cement and just slobbered some roofing cement over the top of each one of the nails. You know, not the most optimal method that I'd like to see. So this is going to be an area where I would look inside pretty closely for any evidence of leakage, and I'd certainly comment that it's not really, in optimum condition, and it may require some periodic maintenance. So I'd really like to see a roof to wall flashing there, but just sometimes it's not possible, or it's not done because of the budget. We don't know what was considered during the budget and what was offered to the homeowner, and many times they have to make a choice. They've only got so much money to put a roof on, so they're doing the best that they can. We're going to change position a little bit and look over. There's some issues I could see on the gutter, so I'll be right back in a couple seconds. Well, I know we keep talking about gutters, but gutters are an important part of the water distribution system to get the water off the roof and away from the house. And on this house, we can look, and I got my little pointer here, and we've got, about an inch of water in the gutter. And if we look down here, we can see that there's even more water, and there's actually plants growing out of the gutter. So this is an important maintenance item, and it's really something that's best left to a professional, because it's hard to do, to clear out the gutters, and you have to get on a ladder, and that can be dangerous. So this entire gutter needs to be cleared out. We can see we've got a lot of mud and leaves and organic debris, so that we're just getting plants growing out of it. So that needs to be corrected to properly get this water off the house. And when you have this amount of water sitting in the gutters, it puts a lot of weight on it. Remember that water weighs about 8.5 pounds per gallon. So this puts a lot of weight on the gutter, and it can actually strip it right off the building. So we're going to go ahead and jump up on this roof and take a look over here, except I see one thing out of the corner of my eye. This is the neighbor's house, and I see where they've got this panel siding. This is, some people call it texture 111. It might be another texture, but these are panels, and you can see here we've got a vertical joint with a band, and look at the deterioration in the siding. I don't want to do too much to it because it's not our house, but a lot of deterioration here in the siding. So that's something real critical to look for when you're inspecting this type of a home that has this type of panel siding. Wherever you have horizontal joints that are basically little roofs, you want to look closely at the siding, because it tends to suck up the moisture right off the flashing. And we've got some significant deterioration on this siding all the way along here. So fortunately it's not our concern, but eventually somebody's going to have to do something with this. And another key thing too is how much damage is in the wall. So when you see this, there's certainly a potential for hidden damage inside the wall. So we're going to go ahead and get back to the house we're working on, which is over here. So we're going to go up on the roof. See you up there. So we're finally up on this roof, and as you can maybe see, this is a pretty steep roof. This is probably a 5 or 6 and 12. This is kind of one of those optional get up on. It's if you feel it's unsafe, you don't have to do it, and you could inspect it from a ladder at the eaves and from the ground. The fortunate thing is, with the steeper the roof, the more you can see from the ground with binoculars. And of course, some inspectors are using drones. So let's take a look over here at the chimney. We can see we have a masonry chimney. Now the flashing integration in the chimney looks to be good. As a matter of fact, it looks like a reglet was cut into the mortar joint, and the flashing is integrated into that. Looks to be in good condition where the shingles meet the side. Now the top of the chimney, we can see a little bit of cracking on the crown that would be pretty typical. I'd recommend some maintenance. That's where all the water gets in on chimneys, so we want to make sure that that's maintained well. And you can see that we have a cap and spark arrestor combination. So it looks pretty good, but the maintenance on the chimney is critical, because when the water starts to get in, it gets all the way into the structure, and that's what causes a lot of damage. And then over here, we've got our ridge cap, and that's kind of an area that could be subject to damage. The shingles will crack, but this looks to be in good shape. So I don't see any missing. I don't see any exposed nails that might need some maintenance. So it looks to be in good condition here. And then over here where I'm standing, we can see what's called a closed cut valley. It's not perfect. It's probably not the way I would do it, but it doesn't look like it's holding any debris. So it looks like the water's getting off of it. And of course, where you really want to look at this is up in the attic for any evidence of moisture. But looks to be in good shape. And we've got a couple, the way that they cut the shingles, it can tend to hold debris. And if you look here, you can see it's kind of a reverse lap tabs are on these laminated shingles. So that can tend to hold up debris, but there's not a whole lot of trees here where the stuff is hanging up. So it looks to be in good shape. Gutters around the front, I can see water in them. So again, we need to have gutters cleaned. I think that's a recommendation for the whole house here. And we're going to go ahead up top and take a look at a little bit more, and then we're going to try and get off of this thing. See you over there. All right, we moved up to the peak of the roof, and you can see down we have another chimney here, a masonry chimney. It's got a saddle behind it, which you need because the further down the chimney is from the peak of the roof, the more water that's going to slam into it. And we can see that the flashings are installed high, so it picks up that water that bounces up, and then the saddle pushes it to the side. So that chimney looks to be good. I see at the top, looks to be maybe a little bit of patching and some spalling off of the brick. That usually means that water's getting in, and when it freezes, it'll pop off the brick. So again, I'd recommend some maintenance on the crown of the chimney. And then over here to the left, we can see that porch extension. Now the roof material itself, the surface of the roof looks to be in good shape. And then if we pan over here by the ridge, we can see our ridge vents. They look to be properly integrated with the flashing into the roof material. So the rest of it really looks to be in good shape. Don't see anything unusual here. I'm going to recommend some maintenance on chimneys, obviously the gutters, and that's about it. We'll see you on the next roof. So we're on our way down off of this roof, and this was our access point, which is a little kind of like a walk-through shed between these two houses. And this roof here is essentially a rolled cap sheet, probably a 72-pound, and it looks like maybe cold applied material between the laps. And we've got exposed nails here throughout, which of course are rusting because they're exposed. Questionable flashing here. We don't know what's in here. It's not part of the house roof. However, it's something that we probably should comment on as being, not a long life expectancy roof. I would expect to see leakage, and I would expect that it's going to require ongoing maintenance and occasional replacement. This type of material does not last very long. So it's worth a comment, I think, just so people don't call you up later and say, hey, you didn't tell me about it. But it's a small shed. It's maybe it's 75 square feet of roof, but it's all exposed nails, not really installed professionally. Looks like I call it a temporary roof, and it's going to require some ongoing maintenance. So you can see the exposed nails here, but it was a great place for us to get up on, to get on the roof. So we'll see you next session. Mike Casey, Home Inspection University. See you next time. Hi everybody, Mike with Home Inspection University again. I'd like to finish up with some of the issues regarding composition shingle roofing that we've been looking at in this video that are probably easier to look at in photographs than to try and get up on the roof. So we're going to go ahead and look through some of the issues with composition shingles and continue on with this asphalt shingle or composition shingle 1 hour show. So first thing I want to talk about is typical standards of practice for home inspectors. which can be defined also as our standard of care. And what is it that we're required to inspect on the roof? Well, obviously we're required to inspect the roofing materials. And some standards call this the roof surface, which is probably a better description because we're not required to perform any destructive testing or to try and pull back shingles and look underneath. As a matter of fact, that can cause some damage, and it probably is not a good idea, especially in older roofs because they tend to be more brittle. We also want to look at the roof drainage systems. And sometimes this is as simple as just sheet draining off the edge of the roof. Some homes don't have any gutters, but many do. It's always a good idea and a good recommendation if they don't. So if there are gutters installed, we should be looking at the roof drainage system, which is the gutters and the downspouts. And most of the time I'm recommending that they get them further away from the house. And then flashings. Now these are the most critical portions, are the flashings, which is any integration of the roof into a penetration, such as a chimney or a pipe that goes out for a plumbing vent or an appliance vent, such as a gas bee vent or an oil furnace or boiler vent. So those are all going to be flashed. Roof to wall conditions are sensitive, so we should look at flashings. In my practice, what I like to do is go up in the attic first before I go on the roof. The roof is one of the last things that I get up on, or I'll view it from a ladder at the eaves. It all depends upon the slope and the height and all that. So I like to look underneath in the attic first to determine if there's any areas where we know that there's leakage coming through because there's evidence of damage. And also many times I have found where the roof sheathing itself is damaged and deteriorated. And I've found areas of the roof that I definitely don't want to walk on because I don't want my foot to go through the roof. And actually many times after going through the inside of the house and up in the attic and looking at the roof from the ground, there is no reason for me to get on the roof because I can see that the roof is in need of repairs or replacement. And then finally, we have skylights, chimneys, and roof penetrations we're required to look at. So that's pretty much the same thing as flashings, although penetrations, and chimneys, those are a separate inspection in themselves because you're looking at, chimney for a fireplace or whatever it might be, and that's another inspection. One thing to keep in mind too is that the IRC does require that any penetration of the roof that is 30 inches or greater in width requires a saddle on the back side to divert the water to the side. Of course, if the chimney's way up near the peak of the roof and there's only 2 inches of roof going towards it, it's probably a moot point and really doesn't need to be done. So the further down slope that the penetration is located, the more water that's going to slam into the back side of that penetration. Now there is an exception for the saddle for skylights that are installed per the manufacturer's instructions. You don't have to do the saddle because many times the cricket would be higher than the darn curb of the skylight itself. So use some practical sense when looking at these things. But skylights installed per the manufacturer's recommendations don't require a saddle. But typically we're going to need them on chimneys that are wider than 30 inches and so on. Oh, and that is wider than 30 inches. I think before I said 30 inches and wider. Not that an inch really makes a difference, so you'd probably want to recommend it anyway, even if it was 30 inches. All right, we're also required to describe the type of roof materials. Now, we're not talking about determining what's the manufacturer of the material and so on, or the warranty, is it a 30-year, 40-year, 50-year shingle, etc. We're not required to do that. What we do need to do is tell people what type of roof they have. And when it's what some people call asphalt shingles or whatever, I just call them composition shingles. Some inspectors call them fiberglass shingles. That's okay. I just like to use the word composition shingle because it's much more encompassing. And then also we need to describe the method used to inspect the roofing. And this is important because it provides in the report information about how exactly we inspected the roof. Now, many roofs are going to be too high or they're too steep to walk, so we need to make that clear in the report. and tell people how we inspected the roof. And it may have been from the ground with binoculars. Many times in two-story roofs, I inspect quite a bit of the roof by looking out windows at the lower portions of the roof, and I can extrapolate the conditions that are up higher based upon what I'm seeing out the windows. And I just explain that very clearly in the report. Many times I look at the roof from a ladder at the eaves. That's another popular method. So key thing is to tell people what we did. And let's say you have a two-story building where there's one-story portion of roof and then a second-story portion of roof. If you were unable to see at all the second floor portion because it was too high or whatever the reason, or covered with snow, make sure you tell people in the report and take a picture. It's important to describe the method of inspecting the roof and what we could see and what we could not see. And then finally, we're not required to walk on any roof when it could damage the roofing or it is unsafe for the inspector. So you don't want to get in any material that's, and it could be composition shingle roofing that's old. So if it's old or it's got moss on it or whatever, you probably don't want to walk on it because it could be slippery, or you could damage the material. If the tabs are getting so brittle that they might break off, don't walk on it. There's no sense. You don't need to. You can see that it's already deteriorated. It most likely needs to be replaced, so why walk on it? So we don't have to do it if it's covered with snow, if it's wet, and etc. Just explain that in your report. And then we're also not required to report on attached accessories. And that's regarding satellite TV antennas, standard antennas, that type of thing that would be an accessory. We're not required to report on those. Now, if I see where there's any damage, or this component that was installed that's an accessory that might cause damage or a problem with the roof, obviously I'm going to report that. I'm not going to walk around the roof with blinders on and just ignore this stuff because we're not required to look at it. Okay, so first thing when I get to the property, I'm thinking about safety. And if we look at this roof, we can see that we've got some frost on the roof, there's snow in the driveway, and that's a really steep roof. That's probably 6, 7, 12 slope roof. I am not walking that roof. So this inspection is being done from the ground with binoculars. Some inspectors use drones, and that's great. Now this one we've got this frost and probably some snow covering portions of the roof. So we have to make sure that we comment about that limitation as well. This is the type of house where I'm not setting up a ladder to get up on this roof because of the frozen condition of the ground. It's just not safe, and it's not worth a home inspection fee to spend a couple weeks in a hospital from falling off a ladder. So if it looks unsafe, too steep, whatever the reason, just report it. Make sure you document the conditions and what you see and put it in the report, and you should be good to go. So don't be getting up on this stuff and getting hurt. Use your judgment. Obviously, you're the one who's responsible for your own safety. So, just be careful. You don't want to fall off a ladder. That's a pretty common injury for home inspectors. I know it's happened to me, and I'm a lot more careful now. Pay attention when you're getting up on ladders. Be careful. You're not getting paid enough to get hurt for sure. And make sure that your ladder is set properly. Firm, level surface. I know where I live, we have a problem with gophers. And you set up a ladder, and sometimes you'll get up on second or third rung, and all of a sudden the ladder foot collapses into a gopher tunnel. So you got to be careful. You never know what's there. Make sure that the top of the ladder extends about 3 feet above the eave or wherever you're going to be getting up onto the surface. And this is so that you can hold on to the ladder as you're mounting the roof and dismounting. So that's important. And then obviously set your ladder at the proper angle. Generally, there's going to be a sticker on the side of the ladder that looks like an L, and that shows you what the proper angle is when that L is in a plumb condition. So pay attention to your ladder, make sure it's safe. I can tell you as an inspector who's done over 10,000 inspections, I spent a lot of time on ladders, and you get kind of just used to getting on them, so you become a little bit apathetic about getting on ladders, and you really need to pay attention every time. It's very important. Same thing when you're up on the roof. Never walk backwards on the roof. Always face the direction that you're walking. Sometimes inspectors will be taking a photo of the roof, and they'll kind of be distracted looking through the camera, don't do it. Make sure that you're looking where you're going every time you're moving. That's really important. Okay, the roof function, really it's simple. The roof is required to shed water and protect the structure from wind and rain. So essentially what we want the roof to do is keep the weather out of the house. So real simple for the roof to be functioning as intended. However, a lot of times it's not. So we're going to be talking about today, as we've been going through this video, you've seen a couple of houses, composition shingle roofing. Now, comp roofs are typically made out of two different types of materials. There are organic shingles and inorganic shingles. Now, organic ones are the ones with a cardboard mat, and they're kind of thick. We used to see them a lot on older homes. They were thick shingles. The classic example I can think of is the old houses with the Dutch lap shingles, and they were thick. Gosh, they were almost a quarter-inch thick. Now, that's a real classic organic mat shingle. Now, inorganic is pretty much all we see today, where the mat or the matrix that the asphalt is impregnated onto or stuck to is just basically an inorganic or fiberglass mat. So all dimensional and laminated shingles are inorganic. Pretty much all the 3 tabs are now. The asphalt material is what creates the weatherproof barrier. And the granule element, typically that's the ceramic granules on the top side of the shingle that we see. That's there to protect the shingle from UV rays, from the sun's damaging rays, and obviously it adds the color. So the granule element is what helps protect the shingle, asphalt, and fiberglass from the sun's damaging rays. And really that's how the shingle ages. As you have rain and weather, it washes off the granules, and this then exposes asphalt, which is beat up by the sun and the UV rays, and then it rains some more and it washes more of that off, and eventually the shingle erodes and you'll see big piles of the ceramic granules at the bottom of the downspouts. So that's telling you that you're getting a lot of granule wash off, and a typical aging process for this type of roof. So organic, inorganic, I think we know the differences. The organic is going to be thicker than fiberglass. Does it matter? Not really. Pretty much all we're going to see now is fiberglass. Some roofers prefer the organics, but they're just hard to get. I can tell you that I have seen these things, the organic shingles, the old ones, last a heck of a long time, but pretty much they're all gone now. So what affects performance of a roof? Well, obviously proper installation. Things that we're going to see are overexposures, improper nailing, exposed nailing, nail patterns. That's kind of hard for us to see because you'd have to peel back a shingle typically to look at it. Flashings of drainage is a big one as well. Any water ponding on a roof can create an issue. Of course, that should not happen with a composition shingle because it's going to be a sloped roof, hopefully, where the water is running off. Maintenance of the roof. This is a big one here. Maintenance of a composition shingle roof. I don't know. I don't see too many homeowners that perform maintenance. And that could be as simple as having a roofer or a handy person get up on the roof and sweep off vegetation debris that's hanging up on the roof. Usually it'll be in the valleys or under areas where you have trees overhanging, or even trees rubbing the roof. So we see a lot of this stuff and we'll recommend it. I always recommend a roofer. I have some people ask me, do you think I can do that myself? And I don't answer that question because I don't know. I just tell them that you know your capabilities better than I do. My advice is always to recommend a professional, someone who has proper ladders, they're used to getting on roofs, they have fall prevention equipment. That's the best to do. I know it costs more, but in the long run, it's the best way to do it. Exposure to sun will affect performance of the roof, and the sun weathers roofing and causes it to deteriorate. That's a known fact. I've seen roofs last a lot longer that are close to the beach because they get less sun, and then ones that are out inland where there's sun all the time will not last as long. So sun really beats up the roof. And of course, exposure to wind can blow off shingles, it can break off tabs. Snow puts strain on the roofing as it slides off, and of course hail will beat the heck out of a roof. And if you have hail damage, many times homeowners insurance will pay for a new roof. So do dimensional shingles perform better than 3 tabs? So by dimensional, What I'm talking about are architectural grade shingles. Some people call them laminated, or the ones with the more profile to them. They have usually tabs added so that they have some more reveal and give the roof some more shadow and dimension, so it looks almost like a wood roof or something that's bigger and stronger and thicker, which typically they are. Although there are some that are not. They're kind of a glorified 3-tab, which we'll talk about a little bit later. One good thing about dimensionals is they tend to not have tabs that'll blow off or keyways for garbage to hang up. A standard 3-tab shingle has those keyways in between the tabs that tends to have an area it's kind of like a gutter for the water to run down in a road, and also crap from trees and so on can hang up there. Most dimensional shingles are going to have more nails. You're going to have minimum 4 nails. I recall the standard 3-foot 3-tab shingles a lot of times would only have 3 nails. Most of the time we're seeing 4 to 6 nails in dimensionals now, and a lot of insurance companies insist on them when they're going to be paying for a replacement, or you're in a hail area. Now here's a photograph of some typical laminated shingles. This is a very simple roof. We've got a gable this way. We've got another intersecting gable here. You can see this roof has a ridge vent, and also this roof has these lead bend over flashings where it's a whole the lead pipe goes right over top of your ABS vent pipe, and then you kind of squeeze over the top here inside the pipe, and that's a really good method of flashing. Although once in a while I've seen them break off right here because of longitudinal movement in the piping from expansion, but not often. You can see they have a little bit of an expansion kind of a member right there. So this roof looks pretty typical, laminated shingle or fiberglass shingle, whatever you want to call it. We've got ridge vent, and we're also going to be looking for openings down low, because you need to have openings up high and openings down low so that you get airflow in the attic. A ridge vent alone is not going to provide you with enough ventilation. So here's a little blow up of, or a break apart of a typical laminated shingle roof. You can see up top is the ridge cap. We'll have a ridge vent typically here now. This is the field of the roof of the dimensional shingles. Right here is the underlayment, and that should be a minimum type 15 felt. We used to call it 15 pound, but not anymore because it doesn't weigh 15 pounds anymore. And we should have a membrane from the edge of the roof to at least 3 feet or so inside the house beyond the exterior wall if you're in a cold spot where there could be ice dams. Do note that the IRC minimum inside is 2 feet, but most roofing companies or manufacturers recommend 3 feet. So, and that's something we really can't see anyway. Now, we might be able to see the evidence of water getting in from past ice dams if it's not properly installed. And then, of course, down low here, we have typically soffit vents, so we can allow the airflow will come in and come up out through the ridge vent. So that's a pretty typical design. Now, laminated shingles are just that. Laminated shingles are basically 2 pieces of comp shingle that are glued together with about 3/4 inches of contact right about here in the middle. So you can almost peel them apart. If you've ever seen them before they've been installed, you can kind of peel them apart. So that's what it looks like. It's a laminated shingle. That's exactly what they mean. And generally they're about 39 inches wide, 40 inches typical, so about 1 meter. And then remember that standard 3-tab shingles are generally 36 inches wide. So that's a pretty typical installation, or excuse me, a material width for that kind of stuff. Okay, so installation basics. When I look at a roof, I'm looking at it first of all from a distance, and really what I'm looking for is that everything is symmetrical, that the courses look to be even. I'm not seeing any exposed nails. Does the surface look to be smooth? Now, sometimes it won't be exactly smooth if it's a re-roof. That's kind of typical. Do I see any shingles sliding out? Do I see any nails popping through or extruding through the roof surface? That's going to tell me that the fasteners are probably too short. And many times that happens on a re-roof because the nails or fastener used are too short. They don't get all the way into the sheathing. Actually, the nail point should penetrate the sheathing inside the attic. It should be long enough to do that. So anything unusual is what I'm looking for on the roof. Now, low slope shingle roofing, less than 412 down to about 2 and 12 is the minimum slope for laminated or 3-tab shingles. And that should be double underlayment. Now, of course, we're not going to be able to see that as a home inspector, but there should be 2 layers of underlayment. And basically what they'll do is take the type 15 felt and just increase the overlap to 50%, so it gets you double coverage. So that's really all that is needed there. But usually we can't see it, so we have to, I guess, assume that. Now, the typical defects that we're going to find in roofing are installation deficiencies, and then, of course, deterioration or weathering deficiencies. Those are the 2 things that we're going to see. So generally, when I'm up on the roof, you can see in this photograph, I find this often where there's ridge vent installed, and then the ridge cap nails are too short and don't penetrate enough to get through that mesh for the ridge vent and down all the way through the shingles below and then through the sheathing. For some reason they use the same nails that they use to put the roof in. I don't know why, but they're too short, don't get all the way through. That's a typical location to find stuff wrong. Overexposure is really common with composition shingles. Now, typically the maximum shingle exposure is about 5 5/8 inches. And I can tell you, if you can see the nail, it's wrong. Now on this one, you can see I've measured it. It's about 6 3/8, so it's maybe a little less than half an inch overexposed. And I don't know why they just did it with these 2 and not the one above. So who knows? You get sometimes you'll see it up towards the ridge where they'll stretch some courses because all of a sudden the roofers realize that they're going to be a little bit short and they don't want to cut a 2-inch or whatever course. So they'll kind of stretch them a little bit up towards the top. Because remember, you start at the bottom when you install these things. This is a scan from the instructions for a laminated shingle right off the bag. And you can see here it's got the exposure, maximum 5 5/8 inches. It's showing us the nail line right here. They want 4 nails. So it's pretty clear when you look at the instructions. It tells us what to do. Nail right through the middle where it's double layer on laminated shingles. That's that little 3/4 inch area where they're fastened together. Here's a roof that we inspected, and you can see this one was installed with staples, and that's back when they were allowed. They're pretty much no longer allowed to use staples on the roofing. And you can see this one, we've got almost like a little bird's mouth here because of the shingle is moving, and then we've got exposed fastener, overexposure of the shingle, more than 5 5/8. You can see here where it's less exposure above this one. It's just really sloppy. So my comment, I'm going to talk about this. We've got exposed fasteners. We've got overexposure of the shingle tabs. It's going to reduce the effective life. It may cause leakage. And I'm going to recommend a roofing contractor to evaluate and provide repair methods and costs prior to the end of your inspection contingency period. Because this could be expensive to fix this. Or you could just let it go and you can assume that the roof is not going to last its expected normal life, which might be around 20 years is pretty typical for these things. Roof to wall flashings. This is a critical area. Right here you can see on this roof that we took a look at where there's an aluminum flashing has just been glued onto the stucco, right onto the surface as a counter flashing for a roof to wall condition. This is kind of sloppy. Now it does happen because a lot of times budget just doesn't allow a proper installation of roof to wall flashings. If roofers are only given a certain amount of money to work with, there's only so much that they can do, just like us as home inspectors. So if we look at this, we can see that it looks like some roofing cement was used to glue this to the stucco. I'm going to tell my clients that this is a sensitive area. It's probably going to require reapplication of roofing cement or caulking, periodically, and it's not an optimal condition. So, there's really not much more we can say. How many layers of roofing? Now, this is critical. Most areas, the municipalities only allow 2 layers of composition roof on the existing structure. So this one, I don't know what it looks like. It's at least 4 to me. Remember that a lot of times the edges are doubled. So this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5. So way too many layers of roofing. Now, if it's not leaking, yeah, it's performing. However, you're going to have definitely an extra added expense in roof tear off the next time that you need a new roof installed. Plus, it's putting a heck of a lot of weight on the existing framing structure. And if this is an area that gets snow or any other type of a changing load, that may cause an issue with the roof framing. So I'm going to recommend that it be at least looked at. My suspicion is it's going to need a complete tear off and replacement. There's really no other way to fix it. Okay, ridge. I do look at the ridges closely, and I'm looking for exposed fasteners, loose pieces. That's pretty typical, and a lot of these you're going to see exposed nails because it was pretty much the only way they could put them in. And that's okay as long as it's performing as intended. Now this material, this was called Dura Ridge, and it was just a product issue, and it failed very quickly. Usually the remainder of the roof was fine, but the whole ridge cap was bad. Some people will say it's a product recall, which is not true. So don't ever say that, because then people think that they're going to get the roof fixed for free. My recommendation is to hire a roofing contractor to reinstall a new ridge material on the roof. This is an example of a metal valley, and you can see here, this is a hip cap, and then we've got a valley right next to it. And it looks to be okay. I kind of don't like the way that these shingles were done because they'll tend to grab debris on the way down. But it looks like it's performing as intended. So the way this was cut over on this side is a little bit funky, but again, it's pretty common, and looks like it'll perform okay. Now, roofing mastic used as flashing. This is a temporary material, and it's going to require a periodic reapplication. So obviously this is pretty sloppy, so I'm going to take a photo, include it with the report, and recommend that there be some more permanent material installed. They could at least 3-course this, which includes the embedment of some mesh to make it stronger so it doesn't crack like this all the time when the sun hits it. And then usually they'll paint it with a reflective paint, so it'll at least last a couple, 3, maybe even 5 years. Here's some counter flashing, and I can see clear silicone caulk right here. Now, clear silicone is not really a long-term material. It kind of looks to me as if there was some flashing installed at one point here that was jammed into a reglet, which is a mortar joint that's routed out. So this is a little bit funky. We can see over here, it looks like there's a hole. So on this one, I'm going to recommend that they have a roofing contractor take a look at it and reapply this, or at least tell them that it's not a long-term solution. So I would call it temporary flashing, is maybe a kind way to put it. Okay, this one is pretty odd. I think the original roof material was most likely a higher dimension. Maybe it was wood shakes, or maybe, who knows what it was. But this looks like lead flashing, and it's counter flashing, and underneath it there should be some step flashing. And when I peeled it back, I couldn't see any underneath. So it looks to me as if it's highly suspect for leakage in the future, and I recommended that a roofing contractor investigate, repair as necessary for optimum expected useful life. Here's some more excessive exposure. You can see, if you can see nails in the field of the roof, it's wrong. So, that's basically it. This is a stretched course. You can see this is the nail line right here. The tab above should be over top of the nail line. Now, this one isn't too bad, right above it. For some reason, we've got this is bad. And it looks to me as if you can see the edge of the shingle here. Here's another edge over here with these laminated shingles. And it looks like we've got some pretty decent offset. It should be at least 4 inches. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. How about right here? So edge of the shingle, edge of the shingle. This is important to look at because I find this wrong many times on laminated shingle installations. So edge offset here, at least 4 inches. Most of them require 5 inches. Here's instructions from the bag again. And you can see here they're telling you they want a 5-inch offset on the edges right here. See, trim 5, trim 10, so that's 5-inch offset. So look closely at that. That's something that, and you almost have to get up on the roof to see that. That's kind of hard to see from the ground. One type of shingle I wanted to point out to you before we end today with our composition shingle roofing inspection video and show is we've got this new type of shingle that's called a pleak that we're going to start seeing out there. Now we've got classic 3-tab shingle right here. I think most of us have seen those. They're pretty thin. They're kind of limp. There's another one that's an applique shingle that's called overlay or applique, which is essentially a 3-tab shingle, and then they just add this little unreinforced, what they call applique. Basically, it's a tab, and that gives it some extra dimension, so it looks a little bit better than your standard, typical 3-tab shingle. But it's still basically a 3-tab shingle. So they're thin, they're limp. I shouldn't say that, not really limp, but just not as strong as your other typical laminated shingles. And then we have the super shingles, which are the 50-year type shingle or whatever, and they're a little bit thicker. But this is an applique shingle. You might be seeing them around occasionally. It kind of looks like this. You can see it's a thin material, almost looks like 3-tab, but then there's got this little added unreinforced tab to it. So I see them once in a while. Here's another view. You can see here just a little added tab. So you might see them. That's an applique shingle, non-reinforced tab on it. So summary, think about safety always first. Be careful when you're up on roofs. I'm going to be looking for installation deficiencies, defective materials we see. That's not really something that's our judgment. Don't say recall, just say it's deteriorated material, and refer it to a roofer is the best way to take care of it. Any abnormal wear, mechanical damage, tab blow off, shingle blow off, mechanical damage from branches rubbing the roof, and make sure that you report your findings in writing. I also always report any previous repairs. If I'm seeing evidence of repair on the roof, that's going in the report. Also, if somebody tells me something about the roof, let's say the seller says, I installed the roof 7 years ago. Great. I may provide this information in the report, and I'll say Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, the seller, told me that the roof was installed 7 years ago. I'm not going to make that guess on my own. I'm going to make sure that I'm telling them where this information came from. And then finally, for some consensus information, we've got some good information that's available out there about asphalt roofing materials or composition roofing materials. If you go to the Asphalt Roofing Manufacturers Association, they have consensus documents about installing composition shingle roofs that are really great. And a lot of this stuff is available at low or no cost. So try that. I think it's arma.org. Just Google search it, you'll find it. And then, of course, NRCA is another resource for us regarding roof installation, although their details tend to be aspirational more than realistic in the field. But it's some pretty good guideline for you. Thanks for attending. I hope you liked our class on composition shingle roofing. I'll talk to everybody soon. Have a great day.